Bear with me, 20 minutes. Can you give me 20 minutes? And I knew before, too, as that pastor, I knew we were going to be short on time. I'll make it up to you on Christmas Eve. I'm very short. I have my word.
8:30.
Perhaps I should complain that my seminary, maybe I should write a letter to my seminary or make a phone call to the dean or the president of my seminary, that they never gave me direction. There was never a course or even one class, single class, on what to do when the election bureau calls from your city and tells you there's a water leakage in your hallways. And it's not only in your hallways, but in the woman's bathroom. And now, to make this story truthful, is actually a member from the congregation who called me. And I'm sure he wasn't happy to have to make the phone call himself, but a member from the congregation called me to share this news with me. I got about 6:15, 6:20. I was at Colton's day school. Yes, Kate, I was late to his day school that day. I was working late. And I got there about 6:15, and Colton and I, we had to skip the park, and we had to run to the church, see what was going on. And there's tons of water all in the hall, and I opened the door to the women's bathroom. You could tell what the woman's commode. Yes, I knew the word commode. People were surprised that I know that. The commode was stuffed. And what do you do? What do you do? My instinct struck. Well, I got a little child in my hand. If I set him down, what will happen? No. So thank goodness my parents stayed a little longer. And they were still in town. So I called my daddy. You're still laughing. That's not funny. So I call him, and he comes, and I put him to work. I did delegation. And he was cleaning the commode and wiping up, and we were both kind of wiping up, and Colton was just looking at us like we were nuts. It was a mess. It was a good father and son experience like this. Well, this one little problem was bigger than we thought. Long story short, bottom line, because environmental reasons, now they're not just going to have to replace that little patch, which you might see in, I guess it's our hallway there by the, into the fellowship hall area. They're probably going to have to replace the entire carpet. My goodness, replace the entire carpet. Now you think that's just snap easy to do. No, you have to call insurance companies, and then you have to call like another insurance company, and then you have to fax material, and then next thing I know, I'm like talking to 3 or 4 different people. I'm trying to make sure I'm talking to proper people on the board. Bill, I'm talking to Judy for a couple of things. I mean, Judy and I were emailing like 6, 7 times one day. It was just wild, all the different things you have to do, and then one day, the committee for this, Jan and Rick, decided, let's go find some carpet, though. Now, I had to tell Rick, no, we're not getting hot pink carpet. Rick, no, it's not appropriate. Then we had to pick up the carpet, and so we can then present it to the board, and it's just all these steps of preparing just to replace this carpet. Now, some of you might know that Kate and I purchased our first home recently, last Tuesday. Never do that during Advent, or preparing for Advent. We purchased our first home during the week of Thanksgiving, basically, and we're still moving in. Last night was our first night there. And by the way, someone asked me, Zach, did you get that garage? I've never had a garage before. Yes, we have a garage. So we have a garage in our house, and one of the things Kate wants to do, I don't know if it's just her, if it's a woman thing, but our bedroom has carpet and allergies, or I think that's an excuse. But we have to have hardwood in our bedroom, though. We have to have hardwood. Yes, honey. Right? Steve knows what I'm talking about. Yes, honey. So we're going to do that. We're going to make it happen. We're going to put hardwood there. And then next thing you know, the smart thing to do, wise thing, is get a contractor, you pick out the hardwood, and you let them go to town. Well, to save a couple extra bucks, we pick up the hardwood and we drive it to the house and lift like 15 boxes and glue and all that's at the house. And then you have a friendly neighbor. I don't want to talk bad, but an interesting neighbor who comes over and he decides to, oh, I can do it. Don't worry, you and I can just do this. Mistake. He's a nice guy, but mistake. Talk about preparing to put hardwood down. Ripping the carpet out, knocking the nails, getting your hands messy. The glue, oh my goodness, you don't want to shake my hands. I'm just telling you already. Getting the glue, scraping the glue off. Preparing, I feel like. Just last night after our craft show, a group of the men and women came, and they prepared our fellowship hall to look very Christmassy, Advent-like. Preparing is something that we do all in life. Preparing. Well, this morning is our sermon on John the Baptist. Probably about every year a preacher has to go through a sermon about John the Baptist. And if you take out some of the things like, you can, okay, yeah, he kind of looked a little different. Yeah, his attire, throw his attire away. His approach, yes, it was a little strong. His approach was very strong to the stuff that John the Baptist said as well. But yet, his meaning, the purpose of John the Baptist, it's very important, especially at the time of Advent. Basically, his main thing is prepare. He's preparing the way for the Lord, and I think he's telling us we also need to prepare for the Christ child to be born once again in our hearts. But also, and not only in our hearts and in our lives, but we need to make a spot for him so the Christ child can grow. So he can walk with us throughout the year. So we can journey with him. We need to make a spot in our lives for the Christ child, not just to come during Advent, not just to come on Christmas Eve or on Sunday after Christmas, but a spot for the Christ child to grow and make his home there. You know, this isn't typically the sermon that you walk out, oh, Zach said a bunch of beautiful words, and it's sweet and sound, but this should in some way be a tougher sermon. It should step on people's toes a little bit, because this is a time that we really look at our lives, it's the right word, introspect of our lives, what's going on in our lives, what makes us tick, what makes us beat. And we look at those things, and does it align with Christ? Because we need to do that for the Christ child to come. Advent is so similar to Lent, the time of anticipating, highly anticipation. And we take an honest look at our lives, and we look at it and we perhaps reflect on some of the assumptions that we have. What are some of the assumptions that we carry with us in our lives? Are those righteousness assumptions? Are those holy? Are those good? Do we have a lot of negativity? Do we have a lot of, or another way to look at it, maybe we have different stereotypes in our lives. And Advent's a time to take a look at some of those stereotypes that we might have. Maybe it's a lifestyle, some different habits that we have. Advent is a time that we can look and really look hard at our lives. What are some of the different habits that we have? Is there something that might need to be tweaked? Is there something that needs to be replaced? We can't be doing something for the Christ child to really come into our lives and stay there. You have to prepare the home. Those of you who had children, you had to prepare your home for the child to come home. So the rest of my sermon, I'm just going to take a few minutes here. I want to talk about some different ways that we prepare for the Christ child, and I'm just going to kind of lay it out there. Some of these may not speak to you at all, but I just want us to be thinking about some different ways to be thinking here this morning. There's an Eastern religious teacher, a guru, if you would say. He basically had a very stellar disciple, bright disciples, doing everything right, and basically he said, you're doing great. You're my number one disciple. I'm going to leave you alone in your little mud hut, and I'm just going to go off for myself, and I'm just going to come back a little bit later. You're just a stellar disciple. You're doing everything great. So this disciple, he was in his little mud hut, and basically every day he did his spiritual devotion. And then he would eat, and then he would take his one possession. He had a little loincloth, and then he would wash it and basically hang it up. And that was kind of like what he did. He did his devotion, he would eat, take his little loincloth, and just basically hang it up. But then one day he hung it up, and he noticed a rat came, and there was a hole in his loincloth. And he said, well, this can't do. I gotta solve this problem. So what does he get? He gets a cat. So then he gets a cat. But now he's not only, in the morning, not only looking for food for himself, but now he has to look for food for this cat in the morning. And then he discovered that, well, I have to pay for food for the cat and food for myself. This won't do. I need something more to help out. So then he got himself a cow. See, the cow will produce milk then for the cat. Then he discovered that he had to make food for himself and now the hay for the cow. So he said, this won't do. This won't do. I need more. So he started plowing and cultivating the land around his hut for food and for the cow. But this became very labor intensive. Really, lots of hard work. It took him away from his time of his spiritual devotion. So he said, this won't do. I need to hire some people to do the work for me. So then he hires some laborers to do all this work for him. But then he realizes the laborers, they're taking a lot of my time. They need direction. So then he says, well, I better get married. I thought that was obvious. I never seen that one either. All right. Then he decides to get married to help him manage the property, to manage these laborers. And then finally, he became like the richest man in the village. The man became the richest man in the village. And later on, his master comes back and he says, what is all this stuff? What's the meaning of all this stuff? And then he looks at his master and he said, you know what? You won't believe it. I had to get all this just to protect my loincloth. Do we ever do anything similar to that? You won't believe this. I just have to have this. I need to get that. Or maybe we say, or this won't do. I need to get the bigger one, the better one. I'm guilty. I'm so guilty when it comes to iPhones and technology. I am guilty. This won't do. Zach needs the bigger one. Zach needs the better one. We all have things to work on. This won't do. To be really happy, I need this. Consumerism or materialism. Maybe that's one thing some people could work on. For sport fans here, or even non-sport fans, there's an amazing movie. I think it came out last November, December possibly. It was probably in the theaters, 2 summers ago. It was probably out on DVD last Christmas. The movie 42. Basically, the story of Jackie Robinson, how he broke the color barrier to become the first pro baseball player, African-American pro baseball player in 1947. But there's this really unique, the whole movie's amazing, warm, touch, all of that. It's an amazing movie. But there's a really unique part in that movie toward the end. There's a scene, and basically, it's before Jackie Robinson and his team for the Dodgers are going up to Cincinnati to play the Cincinnati Reds, and there's all this racism going on, and Jackie's getting all these threats about, and these threats are just cascading down that you better not step foot on the baseball field, you better not even think about playing ball, and in fact, you even have Pee Wee Reese, some of you Kentucky folks, from Georgia folks, a guy from Kentucky and Georgia. He was an all-star shortstop. He played for the Dodgers as well. And even Pee Wee Reese was receiving threats that if you play ball on the same field as this so-and-so, we're going to get you. You do not play ball with this person. Well, the movie kind of goes on. It's kind of the backdrop going up to the big game. Then the movie goes on that the game's basically about to approach, and in the stands, you see a father and son watching a baseball game. Nothing like going to a baseball game with your dad. They're watching the game, and you don't know what they're talking about. Maybe they're talking about the pitching duel. Maybe they're talking about Pee Wee Reese, the all-star. Keep in mind, people from Kentucky came up to this game. Pee Wee Reese was kind of the small-town little boy from Kentucky who made it big. So people from Kentucky went up to see him. So maybe they were talking about Pee Wee Reese. Anyway, they were having small talk, talking in the stands. And then all of a sudden, Jackie Robinson, he hits the field, and his dad, who's like Mr. Warm Fuzzy Dad, you see, just outpours all this ugly language, like venom, just spitting down at Jackie Robinson saying all these name calling constantly. And then the son, what do sons want to do? They want to be like dad, right? So then the son just jumps right in and starts with all this name calling right away, just to be like his dad. But then the unique part happens in the story, and that, believe it or not, in the movie, and it's actually historical too. Pee Wee Reese walks over to Jackie, and he stands right by him, and he puts his arm on him like this. And then all the ugliness, all the name calling, all the slander, all of a sudden just dropped to a murmur. The decimal dropped to a murmur. There was nothing. And Pee Wee Reese just looked up. And right then the camera shipped from that scene, shipped over right back, this is the movie now, but shipped over to the boy and his father. And the boy's face gets you. Here he has his dad. He loves his dad. He knows his dad has to be right. But then now here's his hero, Pee Wee Reese. What is he doing with his arm around this guy? It makes the boy question ethics, a question what is right. Once again, maybe racism's not our thing. Maybe it's another ism, sexism, class discrimination, whatever it might be. But Advent is a time that we can look deep inside ourselves and see what are those assumptions, those stereotypes that we might have, that we might need to remove so the Christ child can come. Some of you, I know you all have, back in the day, we had those big planners, those who worked, and you kept everything in them. Nowadays, some people have their planners in their phone or whatever phone they have, iPad, and you have your planner. But maybe what we need to do, the homework we need to do, the house cleaning we have to do is just look at our planners. Look at our priorities. What's a priority in my life? How do my priorities might need to change so the Christ child can not only come, but stay and grow and journey with us throughout the year? Maybe that's what it is. So we talked about materialism. We talked briefly about prejudices, prioritizing, and maybe none of those speak to you. But the one thing I've learned from house ownership within a whole couple of days, and I'm sure I got a lifelong learning all this, when something in one room is okay, you fix it. Bob Milligan, you know what I'm going to say? Something in the other room crashes. Right? Then you fix this, maybe everything's okay for a while, but then you got to go to this room and fix what's going on in there. And Advent is a time that we can do that. We look in our spiritual lives. I want to take 1 minute, I promise, and just say one thing. So what might need to be in our houses, in our spiritual houses, our lives, for the Christ child to come? And I want to share one quote. I think this quote has the characteristics of what we need for the Christ child to come and grow and be with us. Quote says, "We're trying to infuse a little good into a culture in which gentleness, patience, kindness, control, love, joy, and peace have become abnormal. I go out into America and I'm literally navigating in a minefield. Godliness has become abnormal." I kind of think that quote embodies what we need to have in our lives. Now, does anybody want to take a stab at who said that quote? Was it like a Billy Graham? Was it like a contemporary writer? Some of you like Max Lucado, or some of you maybe like a Rob Bell fan, contemporary writers? No. Was it a famous bishop? No. Believe it or not, Phil from Duck Dynasty. And if we had projectors, I would have the picture of him up. And you might think, looking at that picture from your left, there's not a lick we can learn from a guy who looks like that. Nothing you can learn from a guy who looks like that. But even for us who point our fingers and say that, maybe that just means that we have some houseworking to do after all. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, We give you thanks for the season of Advent as we highly anticipate your Son being born once again into our hearts. We give you thanks, God, for your love, that you decide to be with us. Touch each one of us, Lord. Let us each, throughout this next few weeks, take a deep look into our lives and see where there might need to be some tweaking, some work needed to be done, so that your Son could come into our lives, stay, grow, continually cleanse us, so we can walk with you for the rest of our lives. We say this in the risen Christ's name. Amen. At this time, I invite you to stand up as you are able, and we're going to sing our closing hymn found on page 344. 344, I have decided to follow Jesus, verses 1 and 3. If you wish to make this your church home, I invite you to come forward at the end of the verse 3.